Under the 11th European Union Development Programme, the European Union, in conjunction with 10 other partners, launched a €26.5 million programme in support of democratic governance in Nigeria. This reaffirmed EU's commitment in support of Nigeria's electoral process aimed at promoting transparent, inclusive and credible elections in the country. It is also to strengthen the capacity to conduct well-managed elections and with the participation of all Nigerians, like key institutions to the political parties, candidates from the media to civil society. This commitment in a statement is attributed to the European Union ambassador and head of the EU delegation to Nigeria and ECOWAS, Katil Carlson. The project builds on the recommendations made by the observation mission after the 2015 general election, as well as those of the EU Experts Identification and Formulation Mission to Nigeria. 5 thematic areas are core to these: improved quality of election administration in Nigeria, effective discharge of legislative functions in compliance with democratic principles and standards. The third one is enhanced pluralism, tolerance, internal democracy, and equality of opportunity of political parties and the political party system. Fair, accurate, and ethical coverage of the electoral process by the media, including radio and the social media. And I asked, where is television? Women, youths, and marginalized citizens, civil society organizations, and other relevant agencies contributing to enhance the electoral process. All these are captured in the thematic areas. My guest is the European Union ambassador and head of the EU delegation to Nigeria and the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, Katil Carlson. That will be the focus on diplomatic ties today. Just after this time out, stay with us. Diplomatic ties.
And we're doing our best to make it as convenient and easy as possible for prospective students.
What we can do is just support the efforts of West African countries to integrate, to organize a better regional, political and economic integration.
Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Diplomatic ties, building friendship and enhancing oneness among nations. Watch Diplomatic Ties on NTA International.
Again to Diplomatic Ties.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
It's wonderful to be here for the second time.
Yeah, I must say, if you say take a look at the United States, Asia, name it, the European Union has been very, very visible ahead of the Nigerian elections. Far ahead of preparations for elections, you were there. Then and now, we're at the peak of it. Will you say your investment so far has been worthwhile?
I think definitely. I mean, our investment in democracy in Nigeria is really fundamentally the best investment we can possibly have.
Okay.
And we all know that elections and democracy is not only about what is taking place on one particular day at the year. This time around the 16th of February 2019 or the 2nd of March, those are very important dates, of course, but what takes place in between elections is maybe even more important, because that's where we consolidate the institutions. That is where INEC has the possibility to strengthen their systems, their capacity, their training, their methodologies throughout. That's where the National Assembly, of course, is doing their very important work on legislation. That's where the political parties can work on their intra-party democracy issues. That's where the civil society can do their work to promote participation of women, people with disabilities, participation of youth, and so forth. So what we have been doing, not only during the last months and weeks, but actually consistently over the years, is partnering with Nigerians. You know, not trying to export from Europe a certain way of doing things, but partnering in support of Nigerian-led initiatives. And that's very powerful. And I think that is why you have heard the voice of the European Union resonate so strongly ahead of the elections this time around.
Okay, I'm happy for you to use the word, because some opinion poll was that, but I believe it has changed now, that what's the interest of the EU in Nigeria's election? Is it that they want to control it? But you have just said you're not importing from Europe what should happen here, but adding value to it, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's all about Nigerians having their own say about electing the government.
Okay.
And I never get tired of saying what I'm going to tell you again now. We are not here to support a particular political candidate. We are really not. We are not here to support a particular political party or particular ideology of any sort. We are here to support the democratic process itself, because we genuinely believe that that's the best way to have stability, to have development, to have opportunities for all Nigerians. And that's our interest.
Okay.
And that's also a European interest, and that's important to say. Nigeria and Europe, we are near neighbors, we are friends, we are brothers, we are family. So we are genuinely interested in seeing that development happening in Nigeria. That's a European interest also by the end of the day.
Okay, core to our discussion now is the Independent National Electoral Commission, the umpire for the elections, the political parties, the politicians, and indeed Nigerians. Now, let's start from the Independent National Electoral Commission. So far, given the preparations on ground, what is the impression of the EU?
Well, we've been working very closely with INEC for a long time, and I must say INEC has conducted, if I'm not mistaken, 194 different elections since 2015. That's quite a daunting task, and I could think of European election commissions that would, shiver ahead of such a big task. So I have seen the work being done by INEC. I've watched also in Ekiti, in Ocean, and in other places myself and with my team as observers the work on the ground. And I think the technical capacity of INEC is very impressive. We have seen very significant preparations taking place for a long time. And we have seen INEC very cautiously listening to the recommendations that our observers did in 2015. Some of the recommendations are beyond the reach of INEC. Constitutional changes or legislation is not the mandate of INEC, but there are things that INEC can do themselves that they have done quite impressively. So far so good. Of course, as always, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, as they say, and we keep insisting on the importance of the independence of INEC also on election day. We have seen very positive situations such as the one on the 20th of September in Ocean, and maybe more problematic ones, such as on the 27th of September when we had the rerun in 7 polling units in Ocean 2. So our hope is that INEC has very cautiously studied those different examples and that they transform that into that readiness that we all want to see for the general elections.
This is, you're spoken to plans for well-managed elections now within the thematic areas. Let's come to the political parties. Would you say from 1999 to date, there has been some improvement in terms of democratic visibility within the political parties?
Well, I mean, a democracy depends also on the strength of the intra-party democracy of any country. That's a given, and I think there are still significant challenges there. I don't want to get into an analysis of the different processes ongoing. There are even, of course, as we know, legal cases following the primaries here. But I think in building democracy, that intra-party democracy is really important, so that there is a real, genuine opportunity for candidates to come forward. We have seen very positive signals, such as the Not Too Young to Run campaign and the legislation coming with it. We have seen some attempts of having more women engaging in politics, but I think we also need to recognize that, just like in Europe, in Nigeria or anywhere in the world, democracy is not something static. It's not something that is constructed from one day to the next. It's something that we need to continue nourishing. And of course, just as within Europe, there's also still scope for continuing strengthening that party democracy in Nigeria.
Okay. Now, if you put in place all the sophistry in terms of planning, human and material resources, logistics, and others towards an election, and on election day, the electorate, very crucial here, from the lowest ward to the highest ward, refuse to turn up for the elections, would that be a success?
No, I mean, that would be very unfortunate. Democracy is all about the people, evidently. We all know that. It's about having that say in who should be leading our countries. So, of course, the participation of the electorate is a very important element of the elections. As you say, you need the entire machinery. That's challenging enough. But here you have a strong INEC having worked very seriously on this matter. Of course, you need security services that are neutral also. This is very important.
So, as a strategic partner to Nigeria now, what message will you have for Nigerians who form 100 plus of the electorate on election day? What should they be doing? Because right now, the political parties are on the field, campaigning, agitating for votes, churning out what they intend to do for Nigerians. So, talking to an electorate now, in terms of conduct and what to do, given the fact that you have already in place in Europe an electoral culture in place. Yes, in Nigeria is a build-up. What will you tell Nigerians?
Well, I must say Nigeria has come a very long way in a short time since 1999 and the return to democracy. So there is really belief also internationally that Nigeria can continue showing the world, just like in 2015, that it can be done, that the outcome of democratic elections can prevail. And I think that is the message that the electorate of Nigeria should also listen to, that their voices can be heard, that they must believe in the opportunity of electing those that present the best ideas, the best issue-based ideas on how to address some of the challenges in terms of security, in terms of fighting corruption, in terms of improving the economy. And it's, of course, not for us to decide as international community. That would be ludicrous to even contemplate. It's for the Nigerians themselves to elect those leaders that they believe can lead the country the best way the coming years. So it's really as simple as that. And while doing that, being very cautious not to fall into the trap of selling votes, of letting vote buying take place. I think selling your vote is a bit like selling a piece of yourself to a certain extent. It's selling your influence to somebody else. And people that would want to buy your influence normally would have the wrong reasons to do it. So it's really about boiling down and looking at what are the core issues here, what is important to me as a voter in this election, and then selecting the leadership that you consider the best possible leadership for Nigeria.
Okay. So far, would you say that civil society is visible in the process, or have they been edged out?
You know, I think there is a very vibrant civil society in Nigeria. We work very closely with some of the organizations here, many organizations working day and night to see that continued consolidation of democracy in the country. So you have the Yaga that are doing parallel voter tabulation, looking at what are the results coming out. You have huge observation efforts. You have PLAC doing excellent analytical work, accompanying the legislative processes also. And you have a number of organizations working with people with disabilities. We are partnering with the Albino Foundation, for instance, that have done an amazing job in looking at opportunities of having access to the polling unit, for instance, for people with disabilities, the people with difficult eyesight having magnifying glasses. We have worked with women organizations setting up women situation rooms ahead of the election. So I see a very vibrant civil society on that professional side engaging. What we would like to see also, of course, is the civil society in general participating in the political debate and having a real, genuine political debate about the solutions and the orientations that everybody would want to see on the day-to-day challenges that are faced within Nigeria. And again, it's just the same in European democracy. This is what our aspiration is also for people within Europe, and it doesn't happen overnight. And if you don't continue nourishing it, if you don't have that popular participation, then democracy will be undermined. And we don't want to see that happening, because we know it's the best, if not the only way actually, to see continued stability, development, prosperity, opportunities, jobs, investments coming into Nigeria also. Of course, international investors will look very carefully at what will transpire in an election of this nature. So this again has to do with that general outlook on the future of Nigeria. Not that everything will depend on what happens on just one election day, but it's a quite important signal to the Nigerians themselves and to the world as such.
Okay, media is key, and giving visibility to the electoral process, very key and strategic here. Would you say the Nigerian media put together print, electronic, and the social media, or what they call the new media, is up and about?
I think you have, I mean, compared to many countries around the world, the Nigerian media is also very vibrant. We just did an event ourselves last year where we reached 22 million Nigerians on social media. That's quite staggering and mind-blowing that is possible. When we ask political parties here, they also feel that there is a relatively good level playing field at this point in time. As you will know, the EU has an independent observation mission that has arrived in Nigeria. I believe you will talk to them on your program also at a later stage. They are monitoring very, very carefully the different media outlets and making sure that all are given the same access, a level playing field in the media, because of course the access to people through media is very important. So it's too soon to judge on these particular elections whether things are moving in the right direction. But in general terms, I feel that there is a very vibrant and responsible media in Nigeria, as a matter of fact. We always want to encourage critical media also. And actually, I'm very happy when journalists like yourself ask difficult questions, just like today. And sometimes it's almost like journalists make it too easy on diplomats and politicians and others. I think it's part of a vibrant democracy to have that public debate and, you know, to have the accountability for people that are engaging in the political stage.
But judging from the statement that says falsehood becomes fact if we don't check it.
Yes.
And the media has a role here. What message will you give to the media in terms of being very, very proactive at this period in time to ensure that the right information is churned out in the public domain?
Yeah, I mean, the media has a huge responsibility, evidently, in providing evidence-based journalism, and not to...
Evidence-based?
Yes, and not to...
So how do you place evidence-based and factual-based journalism?
Well, it's not becoming easier on the world stage as we are speaking. As you know, the fake news debate is all over the place. Again, also within Europe, this is something that we are trying to find a way to handle. It's difficult to distinguish between, you know, what is trustworthy information and what is not. But the media, and the traditional media in particular, have a huge responsibility to keep that moral high ground and to make sure never to escalate hate speech, never to reproduce something that will intoxicate the overall debate. And I think there's a genuine interest in seeing that, and, you know, not exposing the Nigerians to unnecessary risks also, because when you approach the big elections, the elephants come out to the ground, and sometimes the grass risks come under pressure. So what we want to see, of course, is just a genuine debate, a level playing field, not having biased media, and just giving that real opportunity for politicians to present their ideas and for the voters to select the leaders that they find the most suitable and qualified and best at this point in time.
Okay. Take you away from electoral governance in Nigeria into comparison now. Europe, Asia, Africa, United States, UK. When you say an enduring democratic culture, in 1999 onwards into successive regimes, we have had the Olusegun Obasanjo, we have had the Yaradua, we have had the Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, and now is the turn of Muhammadu Buhari, and it's been in succession. This has never happened in the history of Nigeria. Will you say Nigerian democracy has really moved from a nascent democracy to an evolving democratic culture towards stability?
I mean, if you look at since 1999, the European Union has been observing elections at every general election since that turn of power into democratic rule, if you wish. And we have seen pros and cons and advantages and disadvantages at all elections. So it's not possible to describe one sort of unilateral overall trend. But having said that, definitely the last elections in 2015 were considered a highlight by the international community, by observers, by the European Union in particular, because there was this very powerful message of a transition of power to somebody who was the successful, democratically elected of those elections. And that doesn't mean that, you know, for elections to be successful, there has to be a transition of power. There could be a ruling president that gets the majority, but there could be a ruling president that loses the majority. What is important is that the voice of the voters is transformed into the actual, you know, decision process by the end of the day, that their voices are heard by the end of the day. So this is what we want to see. But even if you look at Latin America, or you look at the US or UK or Europe, as you mentioned, as I said before, there's really no guarantee to just have for all eternity a continued improvement of democratic processes. This is only happening if we very carefully support our institutions and if we continue nourishing these institutions. And that's all about having independence of the different state powers. You know, independence of the judiciary, of course, also as we approach the upcoming elections in Nigeria is a very important matter to discuss. Making sure that there is that trust in the judicial institutions, because as always, anywhere, there will be legal cases to be handled also around these big democratic processes. Having that neutrality of the security forces is a very vital sign also. And of course the independence of the Electoral Commission itself. So all of these things are very important to measure the continued progressive consolidation of democracy. But again, Nigeria really set a very important example in 2015, and of course we are all hoping and praying that exactly the same will happen in 2019 in terms of just seeing the desire of the voters prevail.
Okay, so what, just thinking aloud, if there's a backlash?
If there's a neck-to-neck race, you say. I mean, if there's a neck-to-neck race, then the institutions are already are put to the test. That is where the solidity of the institutions become even more important. And that is why it's important to have that independence of INEC. That's where it's even more important to have the independence of the judiciary, to have the neutrality of the security forces and so forth. Because as anywhere, of course, politicians get excited if it's a close race. Whether it will be that in Nigeria or not, I honestly really don't know.
Okay.
But that is a scenario in many places. We just had within Europe several countries where it took time to form a government also, because there were close call elections, or you needed to find the right formula and the right groupings getting together in alliances to see that voice of the voters prevail. So that, just like anywhere else, could happen in Nigeria also.
Tempers are high, and the Independent National Electoral Commission has sustained one message to Nigerians that we don't have, quoting them, any particular candidate that we are trying to favor. Yes. All candidates will be given a level playing field. It's left for the electorate to make their choice using their electoral pouch, the PVC. The security agency, speaking through specifically to the acting Inspector General of Police, has also said that we don't have a candidate. We are only making sure that we create and make available the congenial atmosphere secured for everybody to participate in the electoral process. So compared to the two, and maybe you are addressing maybe a colloquium of Nigerian electorate, what will you tell them?
Well, I think first of all, it's excellent when the leaders of the police, when the president himself in conversations with us and with others, and others say, genuinely we back free, fair, credible, transparent and peaceful elections. I think, you shouldn't ever get tired of just repeating that message over and over again, and just having those signals coming from the top echelon of the key institutions cannot be underestimated, because that sends a very powerful message also throughout. Of course, one thing is the words, and another thing is the reality sometimes. So we just need to see what happens and what transpires by the end of the day. But it's absolutely vital to hear those positive signals, and that's very well received also, I must say, by the international community. So we will of course observe and follow very closely what happens by the end of the day. Okay. But hopefully having those kind of constructive messages will also help the voters to believe that they can come out and vote safely, that they can decide for themselves who to vote for, etc. So it's all about building that trust. We did an amazing thing with INEC last year, where we visited the 6 geographical zones with influencers, a lot of Nigerian celebrities. And we did it through a campaign that we called the Youth Vote Count. And this was all about, telling people that your votes actually count. But you don't want to create self-fulfilling prophecies by not participating. If you don't participate, definitely you will not influence the democratic processes. So it's all about believing that there is a real, genuine opportunity to influence politics and to participate in politics overall. And I mean, youth is a quite significant group in this country. Between 60 and 70% of the population are youth. 51% of the voters are young voters. You have candidates following the Not Too Young to Run campaign that are younger. So there are movements and opportunities of participation going on in the country that are quite fascinating. And of course we look to the institutions, as you so correctly mentioned, to play their role to facilitate safety without having intimidation, to ensure that the machinery is in place without having manipulation of results or rigging, for the political parties to present their ideas, but without, using the wrong instruments and hate speech and so forth. So there's a responsibility, a shared responsibility, where everybody have to contribute. We play one of the minor roles, to be honest. What we are doing is that we are supporting partners in Nigeria. We are not trying to replace anything in Nigeria. Okay. We are just supporting your institutions. And then we have this wonderful, opportunity invited by INEC also to come here and observe. And, really genuinely to have observers on the ground since long before the elections until after the elections.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Katil Carlson, EU Ambassador and Head of Delegation to Nigerian ECOWAS. It was nice having you on Diplomatic Ties.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
Okay. If the electorate does not participate actively in the electoral process, then the possibility of influencing what should be can never be. So participation is key. That is what my guest said, and their concern is a peaceful, credible, and open-ended election for all in Nigeria. That's that on Diplomatic Ties. It was nice having you. Always be guest to the program. Bye-bye.